It's not just a company, it's a legacy my father, Walter, built from the ground up. He poured his blood, sweat, and tears into it, and I was right there with him, always the loyal daughter, always the one who understood the values he had woven into its very foundation. We had an unspoken bond, a shared passion for our work that was stronger than anything. And then there was my younger sister, Victoria. She was the one who went to the best schools, who had the charming smile and the ambition that people mistook for talent. Everyone saw her as the golden child, the one destined for greatness. I saw her as someone who wanted to skip the hard work and jump straight to the top, and in the end, that's exactly what she did. My story is about how she took everything from me, my job, my security, and a piece of my family, and why I had to fight to get it all back. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Our company, Innovate Solutions, wasn't a tech giant or a Wall Street titan. We were a mid-sized consulting firm specializing in brand management and creative strategy. We worked with clients ranging from local startups to national franchises, and my father, Walter, was a wizard at it. He started the business with nothing but a second-hand desk and a landline phone, and over 40 years, he built it into a reputable business with over 100 employees. It was his masterpiece. It was our masterpiece, I always felt. I joined the company right out of college, starting at the bottom in the mailroom just like he insisted, working my way up through every department. I'd spent 10 years as the director of marketing, a position I earned through long hours, late nights, and a fierce dedication to our clients and our mission. I knew every project, every employee, and every challenge we faced. My father trusted me implicitly. He would often say, "You're the future of this company, Morgan. You understand its heart." My sister, Victoria, had a different path. She got her MBA from a prestigious university and then spent a few years at a top-tier firm in New York. While I was in the trenches, she was in the C-suite, and she never missed an opportunity to remind us. Every time she came home for a family dinner, the conversation would inevitably turn to her latest deal, her impressive network, and her opinions on how our company was behind the curve. My father would listen with a quiet pride, but I always noticed a hint of weariness in his eyes. He loved his daughters equally, but he'd spent his life on hard work and integrity, and Victoria's fast-track, cutthroat approach was a world away from his own. The announcement came at our weekly family dinner, a ritual we'd maintained for years. We were all at my parents' house, the same house we grew up in. My dad sat at the head of the table, looking a little grayer than usual, a little more tired. He cleared his throat. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he started, his voice a little softer than usual. "Innovate Solutions has been my life's work, but it's time for me to step back. Time for the next generation to take the reins." My heart swelled. This was it. The moment I had worked for my entire life. I looked at my father, a silent understanding passing between us. I was ready. I had the experience, the loyalty, and the passion. I was the one who had stayed, who had built relationships with the employees, who understood the company's soul. Then he said the words that changed everything. "I'm making Victoria the new CEO." The air went out of the room. I felt it, a physical vacuum. I could hear my own pulse thundering in my ears. I glanced at Victoria, and she just smiled, a confident, knowing smirk that was a punch to the gut. My mother, who had been a quiet partner in all of my father's ventures, simply looked down at her plate. It was clear this had been a discussion, a decision made without my input. My father's gaze found mine, a flicker of apology in his eyes, but it was quickly gone. "She has a fresh perspective," he continued, as if reading my mind. "New ideas for growth. She's the right person to take us into the future." I forced a smile, a brittle mask I hoped he couldn't see through. "That's wonderful, Dad," I managed to say. "Congratulations, Victoria." Victoria's smile widened. "Thanks, Morgan. I appreciate the support." I know we're going to do great things. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The future I had envisioned, the one I had worked so hard for, was gone. It had been given to someone else, to the sister who had never truly invested in the company, who had only ever seen it as a stepping stone. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. This wasn't just about a promotion. It was a betrayal. It was the first sign that the legacy my father and I had cherished was on the brink of becoming something else entirely, something cold and unfamiliar. And I was standing right at the edge, about to fall off. I just didn't know how far the drop was. The next morning, the office was buzzing with the news. My father had sent out a company-wide email announcing his retirement and Victoria's promotion. The general sentiment was a mix of shock and guarded optimism. Most of our long-term employees, people who had worked with me for years, gave me sympathetic glances, but no one said anything. The new faces, the ones Victoria had brought in for her strategic transition team, were all smiles and whispers of a new era. I walked to my office, my head held high, determined to prove that nothing had changed. I had a full day of meetings, a new marketing campaign to launch, and a dozen other responsibilities. I was a professional. I would show them that my value was independent of my title. My loyalty was to the company, no matter who was at the top. Or so I told myself. I didn't even get a chance to open my laptop. The chime of my internal messaging app sounded, and a message from Victoria popped up. "Morgan, can you come to my office? Now." "No please." "No hello." Just a command. I took a deep breath and walked down the hall to what used to be my father's office. The door was open. Victoria was sitting behind his old mahogany desk, the one my father had spent a fortune on decades ago. She looked like she belonged there, her posture perfect, her tailored blazer crisp. She gestured to the chair opposite her without looking up from the documents she was reviewing. "Have a seat," she said, her voice completely devoid of warmth. I sat down, my hands clasped in my lap. "Hey, Victoria. You wanted to see me?" She finally looked up, her expression unreadable. "I've been going through the organizational charts and the budget projections. It's clear that we need to make some significant changes to be more competitive. We need to cut costs and streamline our operations." I nodded, feeling a familiar dread creep into my veins. This was corporate jargon for a layoff. "I agree. But we need to be careful not to lose valuable talent. Our people are our biggest asset." "I couldn't agree more," she said, her lips curving into a thin, tight smile. "Which is why I'm starting with the most inefficient department." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I'm cutting the director of marketing position." My blood ran cold. My head started to swim. "What?" "Victoria, that's my job. The director of marketing is a crucial role. You can't just get rid of it. The director of marketing is an outdated title, Morgan. We're moving towards a more agile, project-based structure. We'll have a few senior brand managers reporting directly to me. It's more efficient." She spoke the words like they were a script she had rehearsed. "And besides," she continued, her voice softening slightly, though her eyes remained hard, "I'm trying to avoid any favoritism. I want to show the company I'm serious about this. It's nothing personal." "Nothing personal?" I repeated, my voice rising with disbelief. "This is my career. This is the company I've given my life to. And you're firing me? The first day? It's a business decision, Morgan." "I'm sorry." She pushed a manila envelope across the desk. "This is your severance package. It's generous. It includes 3 months' pay and a non-disclosure agreement." I couldn't move. The world around me felt distant, like a dream. She was offering me money to go away, to be silent, to pretend this never happened. "Dad knows about this, doesn't he?" I asked, a tremor in my voice. Victoria's expression didn't change. He agreed that I had to make the tough decisions. He trusts me to do what's best for the business. My father's words echoed in my head, you understand its heart. He couldn't have agreed to this. He couldn't have. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This isn't just about business, Victoria. This is about you. You've always wanted to be at the top, and you're getting rid of anyone you think is in your way. Her eyes narrowed. I'm not going to sit here and listen to your accusations. You can sign those papers and leave, or you can get nothing. The choice is yours. I grabbed the envelope and held it in my hand, feeling the weight of the betrayal. I wanted to tear it up, to throw it in her face, but I knew that would only give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. So I turned and walked out of the office, the sound of her self-satisfied sigh following me. I gathered my personal items, my family photos, my favorite coffee mug, the plaque I had received for 10 years of service. As I walked out the door, the receptionist, a young woman who had just started a few weeks ago, gave me a small, sad smile. She knew. They all knew. The golden child had come home and staked her claim, and her first order of business was to get rid of the only person who stood a chance of challenging her. The coup was complete. The first few days were a blur of shame and disbelief. I tried to talk to my father, to explain what had happened, but he wouldn't meet my gaze. Morgan, Victoria has to be able to lead without interference, he told me, his voice firm but strained. She's the CEO now. You have to respect that. And the severance package is more than fair. His words felt like a second firing. It wasn't just my job I had lost, it was his trust. He seemed to genuinely believe that what Victoria had done was a necessary business move, and that my resentment was just a personal failing on my part. I fell into a routine of doing nothing. I would wake up, make coffee, and sit on my couch staring at my phone. I didn't have to go to work. I didn't have a project to launch or a meeting to attend. The silence in my apartment was deafening. My friends tried to cheer me up, but I was numb. The humiliation was a lead weight in my gut. I had worked so hard, for so long, to build something with my family, and in an instant, it had all been erased. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. The call from Chloe changed everything. Chloe was the senior HR manager, a good friend, and a straight shooter. We had met a few years back and bonded over a shared cynicism about corporate bureaucracy. Her voice on the phone was hushed and urgent. Morgan, are you okay? I heard what happened. It's insane. Everyone is talking about it. I'm fine, I lied. Just trying to figure out what's next. No, you're not fine. This whole thing smells. It's not right. Victoria's been different. Aggressive. Firing people left and right. And the reasons she's giving are completely bogus. What do you mean? I asked, my heart starting to pound. I mean, she's firing senior people who have been here for decades. The head of finance, the VP of operations, people who are invaluable. She's replacing them with her own team, people from New York who have no idea how we operate. And get this, she's not even interviewing for half the positions. She's just appointing them. A cold feeling of dread and suspicion began to form. This wasn't just a cost-cutting measure, it was a hostile takeover. She wasn't streamlining the company, she was gutting it. She was replacing my father's trusted team with her own loyalists. She told me she was cutting my position to save money, I said, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. That's a load of crap, Morgan, Chloe said flatly. I saw the paperwork. She's creating a new brand strategy department with a director, 3 managers, and 2 junior analysts. The salary for that team is triple what your salary was. And guess who's the new director? One of her old college friends. The shock hit me like a physical blow. She hadn't eliminated my job, she had eliminated me. She had created a new, more expensive department just to bring in one of her people and make sure I was out. It wasn't about the company's future, It was about her personal power. It was pure, unadulterated malice. My numbness vanished, replaced by a searing, white-hot anger. The shame and sadness were gone, burned away by rage. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a necessary evil for the business. This was a lie, a calculated, cruel act of betrayal. And my father had let it happen. He had let his golden child manipulate him into believing this was for the best, while I was thrown out like yesterday's trash. A new thought, a new purpose, filled the void in my life. I wasn't going to just sit on my couch and feel sorry for myself. I wasn't going to let Victoria get away with this. My father's legacy, the company he built, was in the hands of someone who saw it as nothing more than a personal playground. This wasn't just about me getting revenge. This was about saving my father's business from the person he trusted to lead it. This wasn't just my story anymore, it was the story of what happens when you let a snake into your home. The vengeance part of the title wasn't just a metaphor, it was now a mission. And I knew exactly who to call to get started. My first meeting with Chloe was in a quiet coffee shop on the other side of town. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder constantly. "I'm taking a huge risk doing this, Morgan," she said, her voice a low whisper. "If Victoria found out, I'd be gone, and I'd never work in this city again." "I know," I said, my voice steady. "And I promise, it won't be for nothing." "What have you got?" Chloe pushed a flash drive across the table. I couldn't get a full dump of everything, but I managed to copy some key files before the new security system went online. Expense reports, vendor contracts, quarterly budget summaries. And this is the big one. She pointed to a specific file on the drive labeled Q1-2025 Projects. I pulled this off the finance server. It's the new budget for Victoria's pet project. The one she's been pushing hard for. She calls it Project Phoenix. I took the flash drive, feeling like a spy in a movie. The moment I plugged it into my laptop, the screen lit up with numbers, charts, and names. It was a dizzying mess of data, but I knew my way around a spreadsheet. I was a director of marketing, but my father had taught me to understand every aspect of the business, and finance was a skill I had meticulously cultivated over the years. The first thing I noticed was a series of new vendors. Vanguard Consulting, Apex Strategies, Nexus Analytics. They all had generic, corporate-sounding names. Victoria had signed contracts with all of them, but they weren't companies I had ever heard of. I ran a quick search. None of them had a verifiable online presence. No websites, no LinkedIn profiles. They were ghost companies, and the contracts she'd signed with them were for astronomical fees. Then I cross-referenced the vendor payments with the expense reports. The dates matched. Millions of dollars were being funneled to these phantom companies for consulting services and strategic guidance. But there was nothing tangible to show for it. No deliverables, no reports, no proof of work. The money was just disappearing. The amount was staggering. It wasn't just a few thousand here or there, it was a systematic, massive draining of the company's capital. My fingers flew across the keyboard, tracing the digital breadcrumbs. I discovered something even more shocking. The bank accounts for these shell companies weren't in the names of any of her new team members. They were in the names of trusts and holding corporations. But one of the addresses listed for a trust was a familiar one, a penthouse apartment in the most expensive building in downtown Manhattan. I knew exactly who lived there. It was one of Victoria's old friends from business school, the same person she had appointed as the new director of brand strategy, the very position she claimed to have eliminated to save money. This wasn't just simple fraud. This was a complex, multi-layered conspiracy. Victoria had brought her entire crew into the company to strip it of its assets, to pay themselves off with my father's hard-earned money. The new business strategy was nothing but a smokescreen for a sophisticated embezzlement scheme. She hadn't just fired me to get me out of the way, she had fired me because she knew I was the one person who would have seen through the lies. I was the one who understood the company's books and its inner workings. I was a threat to her plan, and she had neutralized me the only way she knew how, by severing my connection to the company. I spent the next 2 weeks poring over every single file, building a detailed timeline of events. I created a presentation with screenshots of the spreadsheets, copies of the contracts, and proof of the money transfers. I even used my old marketing skills to design a compelling narrative, a visual story of betrayal. I didn't want to just present numbers, I wanted to present a case that was undeniable, even to a man who had been blind to his own daughter's deceit. The vengeance that had been a raging fire in my belly was now a cold, calculated plan. I had the secrets in the spreadsheet. Now I just needed to figure out how to use them. The quarterly board meeting was scheduled for the following Friday. It was a formal affair, a chance for the board members to review the company's performance, approve budgets, and get a general sense of where the business was headed. It was also the stage for Victoria's grand debut as CEO. I knew she would be presenting a glowing report, full of inflated numbers and vague promises of future growth. It was my only chance to expose her, to get in front of the people who truly had the power to stop her. I couldn't just show up uninvited. I needed an invitation. I needed a reason to be there. I decided to call my father first, but he wouldn't answer my calls. He was still avoiding me. He probably thought I was still just bitter about being fired. He was a simple man, my father. He believed in hard work and honesty. The idea that his own daughter could be capable of such deception was probably something he couldn't even comprehend. My next call was to my father's old friend, Richard. He was a founding member of the board and a man who had known me since I was a child. He was retired now, but he still held a seat on the board as a non-voting member, a courtesy my father had extended to him for his years of service. I laid out everything for him, showing him the documents, the spreadsheets, the evidence of Victoria's fraud. He was initially skeptical, but as I went through the evidence, his face went from disbelief to a cold, hard anger. "Morgan," he said, his voice low and serious. I can't believe it. But this isn't enough. Not yet. Victoria will just say it's doctored evidence. She'll turn it on you and say you're bitter. The rest of the board won't believe you. Not without solid proof. And a lot of them are her new appointments anyway. Then what do? I asked, my voice edged with desperation. I can't just let her destroy everything. You need to present this to the full board, with witnesses, and at the right time. You need to catch her off guard, a public confrontation with no room for lies. You need a way to get into the meeting. That's when I devised my plan. It was a gamble, a risky, high-stakes game. I had Chloe call me with a seemingly random text message, a picture of a new company memo that was meant to be confidential. It detailed a massive restructuring plan that would result in the termination of a large number of long-term employees, all to be replaced with Victoria's friends. It was the final piece of the puzzle, proof that her plan was to completely dismantle the old guard and replace them with her own. I called Richard back and told him the plan. He had an old-school way of thinking, but he was loyal to my father and the company's legacy. He agreed. He would write a letter to the board members, citing concerns of a hostile takeover of leadership and unnecessary, mass layoffs of tenured employees. He would request a special board meeting to clarify the new leadership's vision and assess its impact on the company's long-term health. He would not mention me. This was the first part of the gambit. By calling for a special meeting, it would force Victoria to answer questions and be on the defensive. It would also get me an invitation. As the daughter of the founder, a letter from Richard would be enough to get my name on the guest list. The second part of the gambit was more critical. I reached out to a few of the board members that I knew were old friends of my father, people who had been with the company since the beginning. I didn't show them the full evidence, just enough to plant a seed of doubt. I told them that Victoria was moving too fast, that she was making rash decisions, and that I was worried about the long-term health of the company. I wasn't asking them to side with me, I was just asking them to be open-minded and to listen. I asked them to reserve judgment and just to be skeptical. It was enough to get them to listen. The final piece was Chloe. I told her what I was doing and asked if she would be willing to be my witness. It was a huge ask, a career-ending move if it failed. But she agreed. "What she's doing is wrong, Morgan," she said, her voice firm. "I can't just sit here and watch it happen. The employees are terrified. The company is failing. This isn't just about us anymore." With my allies in place and the evidence ready, all that was left was to face Victoria and watch her world come crashing down. The board meeting was held in the company's most opulent conference room, a space with a long, polished table and a panoramic view of the city skyline. I arrived early, my heart pounding in my chest. I wore a simple black dress, a stark contrast to Victoria's power suit. She arrived with her posse, a group of slick-looking people from New York who barely acknowledged my presence. Victoria gave me a curt nod, a patronizing look on her face as if she were humoring a child. She had no idea what was coming. The meeting began with a review of the quarterly report, which Victoria presented with a polished confidence that was almost unnerving. She spoke of growth, innovation, and a bright future, all while ignoring the red flags I knew were buried in the numbers. When she finished, one of the board members, a friend of my father's named Harold, cleared his throat. "Victoria, this all looks very good on paper. But there are some concerns. Specifically regarding the mass layoffs. It seems you've let go of some of our most experienced and talented people. Can you explain the rationale behind that?" Victoria's smile didn't falter. "As I said, Harold, we're transitioning to a more agile model. We're bringing in fresh talent that's better suited to today's market. It's a tough but necessary decision for the company's future." This was my opening. I raised my hand. "With all due respect, Victoria, I believe there's more to it than that." Victoria's eyes narrowed, her voice turning to ice. "Morgan, you're not an employee. You don't have a right to speak here." "I am the founder's daughter," I replied calmly. "And I think my father would want to hear what's happening to the company he built." My father, Walter, had been sitting quietly at the end of the table. He hadn't looked at me since I walked in. He looked tired, older, and defeated. He had an expression of passive resignation. He finally spoke up, his voice weary. "Let her speak, Victoria. Let's get this over with." I stood and walked to the head of the table, plugging my flash drive into the projector. The title of my presentation appeared on the screen, An Investigation into Financial Mismanagement and Corporate Misconduct. A gasp went through the room. Victoria's face went white. She lunged for the laptop, but I was faster. I started the presentation, my voice firm and clear. I laid out the evidence, slide by slide. I showed them the ghost companies, the inflated contracts, the money being siphoned off. I showed them the bank accounts, the addresses, the connections to her friends. I showed them the memo about the mass layoffs, the one I had just received from Chloe. Victoria tried to interrupt, but the board members, including my father, were staring at the screen, their faces a mixture of shock and outrage. "This is all fabricated," she yelled. "She's bitter. This is all fake evidence. She's doing this because she's jealous of my success." "Is it?" I asked, looking her directly in the eyes. "Ask Chloe. She's right outside." Victoria froze. Her eyes darted to the door. "Chloe is not an employee you can trust. She is disloyal. She's a loyal employee who's risked her career to do the right thing," I said, my voice rising. "She can corroborate everything. She can tell you about the meetings she sat in on. She can tell you about the memo she received. She can tell you about the other employees you plan to fire." Just then, Chloe, who had been waiting outside, walked in. She was a picture of calm professionalism. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," she said. "I can confirm everything Morgan has shown you. The financials are a mess, and the new hires are a sham. They've been draining the company's funds for months. The room was silent. Victoria's face was a mask of furious desperation. She looked from me to Chloe to my father. He just shook his head, his face etched with a look of profound disappointment. "Victoria," he said, his voice a broken whisper. "How could you? How could you do this to our family? To the company I built?" That was the moment the golden child's facade finally shattered. She looked at me, her eyes blazing with hatred. "You did this," she shrieked. "You wanted this. You've always been jealous of me, Morgan. I was always the smart one. The successful one. You just stood in my way." "I didn't do this, Victoria," I said, my voice heavy with sorrow. "You did. You made your own choices. You brought this on yourself." The board voted unanimously to have her removed and to start an immediate internal investigation. The meeting ended with Victoria storming out of the room, shouting obscenities, leaving my father sitting alone at the head of the table, his head in his hands. The reckoning was over. The truth was out. And the silence left in its wake was filled with the terrible weight of what had been lost. The days and weeks that followed were filled with the fallout from the board meeting. The company was in chaos. Victoria was officially terminated and banned from the premises. Her new team, seeing the writing on the wall, quickly resigned. The board hired a crisis management firm to deal with the public and legal consequences. The new board members were removed. The old ones were reinstated. My father was a shell of a man. He called me every day, apologizing for not believing me, for not seeing what Victoria was doing. He asked for my forgiveness, but there was no forgiveness to give. Not because I didn't want to, but because he hadn't just wronged me, he had allowed his entire life's work to be nearly destroyed by his own blind favoritism. The trust was gone. It had been shattered beyond repair. He called me into the office one afternoon. The same office where Victoria had fired me. He sat behind his old desk, looking small and defeated. "Morgan," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The board wants you back. They want you to take over as CEO. I want you to take over. You were right all along. You're the only one who can save this company. It's yours, my dear. It's yours now." I looked around the room, at the place where I had given so much of my life. I had once dreamed of this moment, of sitting in this very chair. But the dream was gone. It had been replaced by a nightmare. My revenge had been a success. The company was saved. Victoria was gone. But at what cost? The family I had once believed in was fractured, and the legacy I had so loyally served was tainted by betrayal. I knew in that moment that going back would be a mistake. It would be an attempt to reclaim something that was gone forever. The old Innovate Solutions, the company my father had built and that I had helped run, no longer existed. It was a ghost of a company, a hollow shell. And I couldn't just step back in and pretend everything was fine. "Dad," I said, my voice soft but firm. "I can't. I'm so sorry, but I can't. This isn't the company I gave my life to. And it's not the company I want to lead." He looked at me, his face a mixture of shock and sadness. "But Morgan, what about the company? What about everything?" "The company will be fine," I told him. "You have good people here who are still loyal. Chloe is a fantastic leader, and she knows everything about the business. She's the one who should take my place. Not as a temporary replacement, but as the new director of marketing. She's earned it." My father didn't say anything. He just looked at me, a deep sadness in his eyes. I left the office that day and never looked back. I started my own business, a small, independent consulting firm. I worked out of a small office, and I took on only the clients I believed in. I used the lessons I had learned from my father, the ones about hard work, integrity, and building something with your hands. I didn't need a golden child's ambition or a family's name to succeed. I just needed to be true to myself. I heard through Chloe that the board eventually did promote her, and that she was doing a fantastic job. The company survived, but it was never the same. Victoria, I learned, faced legal repercussions and had to sell her Manhattan apartment to pay off her debts. She was a pariah in the business world, and all of her grand ambitions had come to nothing. My father, in the end, realized the error of his ways and the mistake he had made. He had put his faith in the wrong person, and it had cost him dearly. But it was a lesson I had learned on my own. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about winning back what you lost. Sometimes, it's about leaving it all behind and building something new, something better, something that no one can ever take away from you again. The old empire was gone, but a new one was just beginning.